Hi, everyone. Welcome to Warden Tech Talks. I'm Leon,
And I'm Steph.
and we are your co hosts today. Today, we are joined by John Nack. John is a principal product manager at Adobe, working in Adobe's Sensei AI ML research org to explore the future of AI first creative experiences. Prior to joining Adobe, he was a product manager at Google working on augmented reality, and prior to that, also worked at Adobe for more than a decade. John, where are you calling us from?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I am in San Jose, California.
So, John, could you tell us about what you do at Adobe?
Sure. So I am a product manager, which means I've been trying to explain myself to my parents for the last 23 years as to what do you actually do all day? And it's sort of a variety pack. I think at the end of the day, a PM is all about finding product market fit by translating what people in the real world need into the requirements that the team works on. And then going the other direction, we get to explain what it is we've been doing, hopefully in terms that people understand and value. Specifically, I'm working on Adobe Firefly. If folks haven't checked it out, you can go to firefly.adobe.com. And it is our family of models for generative imaging. So you can go in and make images from scratch. You can select a region and you can modify it. You can do some really cool text effects. You can recolor vectors. And there's a whole bunch of things that we have queued up waiting in the wings. I'm really working closely with the team to try to build those things, make sure they get prioritized, trained, deployed. Some of the things I think we'll probably talk about around AI ethics come into play. How do we make something that is high quality, that works well for people across the board, that avoids harm wherever possible? So really that whole can of worms in terms of model development and productization falls into our world. And then within my team, we have various product managers who focus on different parts of the puzzle. For example, working with first-party teams like Photoshop to make sure that they have the support they need and that the model team clearly understands what their requirements are, and talking to Lightroom, talking to video, talking to the Illustrator team about a vector model. It ends up being a pretty huge matrix, but as hard as it can be sometimes, I used to work at the Olive Garden. And I always say that the worst day at Adobe still beats the best day at the Olive Garden. And then everybody says, well, what about the breadsticks? And I say it's very different if you're eating the breadsticks than if you're serving the breadsticks. And I was definitely serving the breadsticks. It's a challenging job, but it's definitely a lot of fun.
What are the biggest use cases you've seen in the Adobe suite for GenAI?
Well, I think the most immediate thing is not a surprise, which is people want to remove objects in Photoshop. I surveyed something like 12,000 Photoshop users last year, and this was a bit after DALL-E had come out, Midjourney was just starting to exist, and something like 40% of people said, making a new scene from scratch is really cool. And 40%, I think, for both features would be a fantastic number. But 60% of people said, actually, it's less about making a whole scene, it's more about just inserting something into a scene. And 80% of people said, well, forget about even inserting something. Sometimes there's just like a distracting person or element, and I just need to remove them. Those very, very sort of straightforward use cases are the ones where we've seen immediate adoption. At Adobe Max a couple weeks ago, we talked about over 3 billion images having been generated so far using Firefly. And certainly putting it into Photoshop has really been the inflection point. I think on the website, people are still coming in and getting their heads around what even is this tech and how could it be useful? When you survey users, like, why did you come here? Often it is just curiosity, just to see, is this good? Is it interesting? And when you talk to them about why they would come back, they have more concrete ideas in mind. Like, when I need to get inspired for my next project, I'll come back and I'll try. It involves cats, it involves water skiing, and probably it doesn't, but it'd be fun if it did. What would you do with a cat water skiing? And make some visual imagery. That's a slightly tongue-in-cheek example. I will say, I think a lot of the art here over the next quarters and years ahead will be to go from the sort of fanciful cat water skiing to something really specific and immediately useful. And so I think to that end, you'll also see us doing more with integrations into products like Adobe Express, where today people might search for a stock photo. And now that they have Firefly access, they can get something more specific and more tailored to their need. But there's so much more we can do in terms of making something and then modifying it to really fit their brand or to fit their voice. One of the cool features we introduced at Max was the ability to upload your own image and have that influence the style. And that can be incredibly powerful. You know, the old cliche of pictures worth 1,000 words. It's like, well, it's worth 1,000 prompts too. And you don't always want to have to come up with exactly the right nomenclature. You just want to say, make it look like this. And then as I create more things, make them all look like this. So I think we're going to go from the sort of 1.0 toy phase where, sure, there's this one really obviously useful thing, removing objects and maybe inserting them, to more specific sort of atomic integrations.
It's definitely fun to see cool ways that individuals have used AI to generate funny images. Are there any industries that you've seen really using this to help increase their productivity? For example, I used to work in marketing, and I could see a lot of my creative counterparts on the marketing side using GenAI to help increase their efficiency and productivity.
Totally. Yeah. In fact, one of the nice problems we have at the moment is there are so many enterprises who want to talk all the time about how can I be a lot more efficient? My career journey to Adobe 25 years ago started with doing the most thankless, non-creative, creative work one could possibly do. Because guess what? I was a history major. I taught myself Photoshop and Flash. So I didn't really have any business working at a design agency, but I was cheap and I was willing to work a lot. So I ended up doing all this stuff where it's like, okay, here's a spreadsheet of 200 strings that Snoopy is supposed to type out. Go ahead and make 200 animated GIFs with that. And that really kind of got me good at using the tools and knowing, man, I know it's just one extra step every time, but if you do that 200 times, you're going to be pretty PO'd. And in talking to folks, like just a couple of days ago, we were talking to a big retailer in Canada, and I was looking at the kind of collateral they make. And not all creative work is the most creative. You know, it's just sometimes, gosh, I have to make something for TikTok, but then also a banner. And then I also have to make a Snapchat. And then you start multiplying that across the need to localize. And then generally people haven't even gotten to like real personalization, but that's the exciting part. And you could know it's like, oh, Steph, you really love, I don't know, what's your favorite kind of food? Throw that out there.
Thai food.
Great. Thai food, and really love, I don't know, German ceramic figurines. I'm completely making that up, of course. But for whatever reason, that's your jam. Maybe we could sell you something better by knowing that about you and actually using those two inputs on the fly together with text, which we could localize. And then we could like smartly position. Hopefully what'll happen isn't that people doing creative work or production work today will stop doing it. It's that they get to kind of move up the stack. My son is 14. He's super interested in typography. And our friend who used to work at Hallmark brought him sheets of letters that you used to use before computers. And he's so fascinated. Like, what do you mean? Like, you couldn't just switch fonts? Well, I'm sorry, I ran out of the letter C. So tough luck. And it's like, that's such an insane thing to think about today. Well, similarly, I hope it'll become true that what one person can accomplish visually will be so much greater that we won't miss a lot of what we take for granted today as just sort of like necessary, somewhat repetitive work, making things fit different sizes. It's like, you know what? If I had a virtual assistant, it should probably be good at that. Like, let me be more the conductor of the orchestra and not the guy who's polishing every flute.
Awesome. What do you think is overhyped in Gen AI?
Nothing. I don't know. It's such an invitation to do the Bill Gates quote about 640 kilobytes of RAM ought to be enough for anybody. Even things which maybe seem overhyped, I'm very cautious because we haven't yet seen how they'll come to fruition. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, people are trying to apply AI to specific domains and finding places where maybe it was oversold. You'll see some Twitter influencer who's like, oh my God, you can make all this collateral. And then you try to make something specific and it's like, it doesn't quite work. I'll give you one example. My younger brother is a trucker and he recently bought his first truck, a milk truck. He's like super excited. It's his own business. And he wanted some art for the hood. It was a very simple but specific request. He's like, I want 2 cows standing up, 1 cow lying down, and it has a green spot. And I'm like, oh, no problem. I could just whip that out. But guess what? If you try that with AI models today, at least as of a couple months ago, it was pretty hard to get there. So you could get 3 cows standing up or 3 cows lying down, and you're not going to get the green spot, and that's okay. There's some sort of 1.0-ness in the gap between the promise and the outcomes. But I think we're rapidly seeing those close. And I think one of the most exciting things is having more of like a conversational ping pong between you and your creative partner, which is this system. Being able to say like, give me a vector drawing of a woman in a coffee shop on her laptop. And it's like, great, here's 2 or here's 4. And that's like, well, that's cool. But like stylistically, could you make it a little funkier? And it's like, what does funky even mean? And it's like, I don't know, but I'll know it when I see it. Did I like it? Did I not? And be like, well, make it more like number 3. That's cool, but maybe make the woman a little older. And having those sort of deltas applied to whether it's a piece of visual art, whether it's a song, whether it's a layout, I think that kind of like semantic editing will be really cool. I know you're asking about what's overhyped. I would say it's more that we're not yet there across the board, but the rate of progress is bananas. And I wouldn't be shocked if by the time somebody hears this, maybe a bunch of those limitations are already in the rear view.
I like the idea of having like a back and forth with your AI tool. The way that my professor put it was treat ChatGPT as your helpful but uninformed intern.
Right. I think that's really good. I think what's interesting is it quickly goes to your maybe well-informed PhD candidate, and all of a sudden it's some super intelligence that none of us can even understand in the way that my dog doesn't know, I assume, what I'm talking about at the moment, right? It's like so off the scale, we can't see it from there. But you're right. At the moment, it is kind of charming, if sometimes frustrating. I'm like, the other day I went into ChatGPT and I'm paying for ChatGPT Plus, and it's got DALL-E 3 in there. And I said, I think I uploaded an image and I said, describe this image. And it gave me a like pretty good description. I'm like, great. Can you make me, it was the Obama Shepherd Ferry Hope poster that a lot of folks have seen. And look, well, describe this. How would you even put this in the words? And it did a good job. And I said, great. Now make me an image of that. It said, well, I can't do that. I don't know how to make images. And I said, well, how do I do it with DALL-E? I, as a human, know it's in there. It's like, well, last I checked, which was 2021, DALL-E was a research project. I'm like, bro, you have DALL-E built in, but your knowledge is capped at this artificial threshold. By flipping some switches, I did finally get it to know about the other half of its brain. But you're right. There is a weird sort of idiot savant, childlike quality to it. And I think one of the sort of societal skills maybe we all have to learn is to kind of ask a question, but then question the answer. Don't just take it as, well, there's a single source here, good enough for me. But that's kind of our inclination. You can't go typically fact check every tweet or every statement from your Google Home. You kind of like, well, that's probably true. But which ones aren't true? That's the trick.
Yeah, that's a good point. That the key is asking good questions.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What are the biggest roadblocks that you see to further adoption?
Well, as I say, I think a lot of things are interesting in principle. And I think the next big tranche of work is starting to close that gap to the tools and tasks and processes that people actually care about. An example might be my CrossFit coach has a small business to run, and his big skill obviously is being super fit and skillful and willing to put up with guys like me who suck at CrossFit but are willing to pay for it. And his skill doesn't have to be making marketing collateral for Instagram stories. But if a tool could help somebody like that capture their ideas and get them in front of the right person, well, then that's super valuable. Well, what does that really mean? And like, how do you meet people where they are? I think that's a really interesting trick to unpack and say, okay, you probably don't want to just like create art in the abstract. Some people do, but it's much more the famous business school aphorism that people don't want a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. So like, what is that hole? What is that outcome? If people haven't read it, there's a great essay by Stuart Butterfield who created Slack, and it's called We Don't Sell Saddles Here. And one of the points he makes is whatever you're selling, it's usually a better version of the person who's watching it or listening to the ad. And in the case of saddles, he's like, well, if we really were selling leather saddles, what we want is like Leon on the beach with his friends, like looking at the Pacific Ocean. It's like, oh yeah, that would be awesome. Like I would have made it then. I'm like, yeah, doesn't that, you could just feel it. You could smell the air. And it's like, yeah, I want that. And it's like, great, let's help you get there. Well, you probably want that horseback ride. Maybe you probably want this saddle, but you've set it in the framing of here's who this person wants to be. They want to be, in the case of Slack, well, maybe ironically now, given that I have 9,000 unread Slacks, they want to be less busy. They want to be less overwhelmed with email. They want to know where the file is. And their boss asks them something. They want to come off looking better. So just make me the better me. I think with AI, the more we can frame it in those terms, the better we'll be. You think, hey, I'm a parent. That's my kid's birthday. I would love to make an epic card, right? Or poster or plates for the party. These are things like I think people want. They don't necessarily come in thinking that's even possible. But if you could be like, hey, do you want to be super mom by doing this? And I'm like, or super dad. And it's like, yeah, my kid loves typography. He loves trains. He loves very specific, golden doodles. Okay, you're not going to find a template with trains and typography and golden doodles. But if you just knew that about him and you knew his name is Henry, that might be enough. And then creatively, your assistant could guide you to that ultimate process of like feeling like the best dad ever, because now I can punch above my weight and make things that he's going to find delightful.
Right. The challenge sounds like AI impacts and helps so many different audiences. You just outlined truckers, marketers, dads. These are really different audiences with really different needs and pain points. So it'll be interesting to see how Gen AI can help all of these different types of people.
Yeah, I think so. I think the general trajectory of innovations is to become kind of taken for granted in a weird way. Like none of us probably got up this morning and were like, oh my God, I turned this faucet and just like water somehow comes out. I still don't know how that happens, by the way. It's pretty cool that it does. But I don't wake up thinking like, oh my God, that's amazing. Much less around how we're having this conversation right now. Like I have these magical little things in my ears and they're talking to this computer, which is going, we accept that. Of course you can video chat. Of course that can be a podcast. I mean, I think AI largely, it's kind of like predicted in the book Brave New World, which I think was written in the 30s, where everybody's traveling by rocket and somebody's PO'd because their rocket is like 19 seconds late. And it's like, oh, Louis C.K. has a great comedy bit about everything's amazing and no one's happy. Because it's like, your cell phone, you're like, oh, it's like taking so long to connect. He's like, it's going to space. Why don't you give it a minute to get back from space? But I think if history is any indicator, AI will follow that path. And pretty quickly, of course, you'll assume that your Gmail app can help you negotiate a customer service beef with Comcast. Like, why wouldn't it? My kids are young enough that they came up right after the iPhone first launched. And for them, any screen you can't touch is broken. You watch a little kid and they're like, go up to the TV. And of course they try to touch it. In fact, I remember when my older son learned to use a mouse, he was amazed. He's like, Dad, it's like you put your hand over here and you don't look at it. And then like this little thing moves around. And like what I then took for granted to him was new. So anyway, I'm rambling, but you're right. I think it will have such broad impact that it'll just become sort of one of the foundational pieces of structure. And then it'll be the sort of fine tuning and the domain application that will make any given piece meaningful.
For sure. As you build AI-driven features in Adobe's products like Photoshop, what are the ethical considerations that you have to think about?
Oh man, what aren't they? Yeah, it's a great question. And we could definitely do a whole session just on this. I mean, at a top level, one of the most basic things is making sure that everybody is treated fairly by the tool, which is to say, we do enough testing to make sure that for all the diversity of human beings, age, ethnicity, gender, self-expression, we can produce substantially similar quality across those axes. And that takes a lot of work. Early on, people noticed that because of the different representations in the data set, you would get these either quality deltas, where it's like, oh, if you're a young white woman, it does a great job. But if you're like an older person of color, it's lousy because there are fewer such images in the database. Or I think NVIDIA speaker was mentioning once that they noticed with their GAN that as you made somebody older, they became more male in presentation. And the reason was just the data sets. It's like, if you look at advertising, it's like culturally you'll have young women and you'll have older men. And then it kind of just correlates those and thinks they're the same thing. But that's kind of a baseline thing. It takes a lot of work. I think beyond that, then you get into judgment calls about how do you represent ideas and which ideas do you help represent? Which ones do you discourage? Sometimes we run into false positives. The last thing we want to do is produce a result that's offensive. And one of the, of course, easiest ways to be offensive is to like produce nudity. Like this stuff gets pretty sensitive pretty fast. But there's also interesting questions like what depictions of violence are okay? How do you treat symbols of nationality or religion? It's an uncomfortable spot for me if I'm being honest, but it's also a necessary one. To me, it feels like sort of a perpetual journey. But again, I hope we can have that be a dialogue, and I hope we can give folks tools where they can then get the creative outcomes they want by virtue of having taken more responsibility for them.
John, you talked about Midjourney, and there's certainly a lot of competitors in the Gen AI space or new startups. What makes Adobe best suited to adopt, monetize, deliver this new Gen AI technology?
Well, I think the obvious advantage Adobe has, much like, let's say, Google, Microsoft, other companies with really popular tools, is we have a great go-to-market. We have surfaces through which we can expose those things. And like I say, the really strong product market fit is content-aware fill in Photoshop. Like pretty much everybody's had a case where, oh gosh, like this would be a perfect photo, but this guy's arm is cut off. And it's like, well, tough luck, take another photo or live with it. It's like, well, you don't have to now. You can just take the crop tool, make it wider, and boom, it's fixed. I think those like cases of super low-hanging fruit are really, really powerful. I mean, the disadvantage we have is all of the legacy we've got, all the expectations. There's a certain way Photoshop works. It's great that it works that way. I spent 10 years helping it work that way. But it's like if you built a truck, well, you didn't build a car or you didn't build a motor scooter. Lots of competitors are coming out and saying, we literally and figuratively have a blank canvas. How would you start from scratch? And so I hope and think Adobe also has that opportunity where we're not constrained by the go-to-markets that we've had. Those are great, and we will absolutely move them forward. But we also can reach new audiences, and we can say, look, try the Firefly website. Like literally, what do you need? A web connection and a browser, and you're good. You don't have to pay upfront. Sure, there's metering that kicks in at some point, but we really want to make it as broadly usable as possible. And then we want your business, but we want that based on you having seen like real value and coming back a bunch.
Yeah, to kick it off, we'd love to learn, how did you find your way into product management?
I was a kid who could draw. It's like in the 1970s. But I remember like being with my parents when I was 3 and like cracking the code on how to draw a car, which at the time was like 2 circles and then like an arc and another arc. And I'm like, oh, I could do a car. But I remember being 3 and figuring this out. So I loved doing that growing up. And computers, when I was little, were like Apple II. It was like black screen, green cursor. If you could draw anything, the way you quote unquote drew it was to like line by line, like punch out ASCII cards or ASCII codes. So when the Mac landed, when I was about 8, that was the real game changer. That was this breakthrough moment where it was like, well, not only can I draw as I might on paper, I can now draw things I could not draw previously. Computers were really expensive, and I couldn't get a decent one for almost another 10 years when I got to college. But as soon as I did, I started learning Photoshop and animation tools, and I started teaching professors how to do things. I got hooked up with an education technology lab, and I went through, honestly, a really dark, crappy period of my life. I had been taking philosophy and theology, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I didn't know how to get out of there. So I ended up quitting school, and I was out ultimately only for a semester. It was kind of the hard reboot I needed. And the divine intervention was, there was a Notre Dame football player who had gone pro. He'd done really well, Jerome Bettis, if anybody's a football fan. And he suddenly had some money. And so he bankrolled a bunch of his buddies from the football team who weren't going to go pro and did a little startup. And somehow, through some miracle, I found out about it. I quit the Olive Garden. I went over to work at this startup. And that's what gave me any like vocational skill. So I came back, I got a history degree just to be like, cool, let's put a button on it and move on. It also was good timing because in the late 90s, the dot-com era, I was able to find an agency where they just needed like warm bodies who worked for cheap. And again, it was a way in. I didn't have a design degree. And from there, I kind of found my niche. I was doing like really cool websites. My kids are like, you animated the Gucci website? I'm like, I did. And they're like, but you're not famous at all. I'm like, why would I be famous? Well, first of all, thanks, kid. Why would I be famous for animating a website? Anyway, it's sort of funny. But really, it was doing all of that work day in and day out where I got super familiar with creative tools. And what I realized at some point was, I'll be okay at this. I think I could get good. Probably not going to be great. But the bigger impact I could have would be helping other creative people by just getting all the crap out of their way. The satisfaction, though, is when I see the beautiful work folks are able to do. I'm enchanted by helping other creators create better. And if I got to pick a mission in this world, it seems like a good one.
Love it. I love how it goes back to when you were 3 years old, drawing a picture of a car.
Totally.
And that goes to our last question for you. Can you give us your most non-consensus opinion, ideally on AI, if you don't have one, just on anything in technology?
I would say that candy corn is objectively good. I think few people would join me on that. I have friends who, if they could throw their phone into the river as they're listening to this, probably would. That's my edgy statement right after Halloween. Yeah. But when it comes to AI, I think we'll be okay. I think there's a lot of disruption. It's not all fun. That includes for tool makers. Absolutely. But I think we'll be okay. Humans are pretty resilient. I think we'll learn to be skeptical in hopefully constructive ways around media. And I think it'll be net positive for creativity. I think we'll never want to go back.
There's a big debate on Twitter about if AI is going to end the world.
Sure. And if it does, I guess then we'll be dead and we won't probably care about it. So,
yeah, fair enough.
We'll find out. So FAFO, right?
Exactly. Well, that wraps up our interview for today. Thank you so much for being here. You've definitely given us a lot to think about. We really look forward to following Adobe and the future of generative AI for years to come.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. It's always fun. And to quote another old Google boss, I never met a microphone I didn't like. It's always a chance to go off about some stuff. But yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity. And if folks are interested, I still have a blog, which is such a quaint thing to do in 2023. Eventually it'll become cool again, I hope. Be like this hipster, like making your own cheese or something. So Nack, that's first initial, last name. That's my Twitter handle. It's my Insta handle. It's my blog address. So it's pretty easy to track me down. And yeah, I like to just post stuff. I try to post something every day, categorize it. If it's AI or ML, if it's illustration, animation, photography. I love to hear what other people are thinking. So tweet at me anytime. And I think we're all lucky to be on the journey together.